Welcome back, baseball fans. The 1973-76 off-season look. Tonight, we are going to do a kind of a summary. Now start eyeballing the draft. We're going to look at the 2,560. This is a sheet of the 2,560 cards over a period of 4 years that would be in the league. But before we do that, just a quick review of what we've done. We've determined, of course, our draft order. Teams 1 to 32. Ohio will pick first for the second year in a row. And, of course, the Oakland A's win the World Series. Reds are runners-up, are 31st and 32nd. There have been off-season trades. Trades have been balanced out with tokens added and subtracted. So we have a token list here, keeping track of all that, so that it starts at 160, 5 times 32, finishes at 160, pluses and minuses in between. We've got general lists of keepers, though that could change, of course. Teams could decide they don't want to keep that guy anymore. We've had a wish list of desired players. We have, in this column, is just sort of a summary of stats, highlights of the stats, just for info purposes. We fixed all the rosters for every team so that they comport, of course, 4 keep, 2 waive, 2 retire. The entire league is set up that way now. We've had the trades made and documented. Tokens were added in when necessary. Big name players like Mike Marshall and his 200 innings pitched in 74 end up getting traded. Frank Robinson gets traded near the end of his career, so forth and so on. We've got each individual team's 12 current players marked by a C that will be continuing and carrying on. 6 in year 1, 4 in year 2, and 2 in year 3. To be drafted will be 2 in the rookie year of year 4, and then 2 more in each of these years to get the 20-man roster. We have this sorted by alphabetically by team, Arizona, and we indicate when we think we could get one of their continuing players better in one of the 4 years. So we've looked at that. We've also looked at the same consideration for guys who are on the keeper list that will represent half of the 8 players you draft, theoretically, would be on this list. And we highlight which of the years would be the best suited, and also the landmines. Stay away from the player in this year. They're not very good. So we kind of have a lot of prep done to make drafting go smoothly. The waiver list has 64 guys in it. We've highlighted some desirable players there. The 64 guys on waivers, of course, they don't play in all 4 years. And lastly, we have the retired list. Well, by definition, they probably shouldn't exist, but there actually is 11 guys who still have Strat cards. Oddly enough, one player, Ray Bear, is the only card in 1975 and 76. Basically, he had to get on retirement because he couldn't make the waiver list. To make the waiver list, you have to have a card in year 1 of the 4-year timeline. He doesn't have his 73 cards, so he had to be kicked in retirement. So after a couple years of missing baseball, he's back in 75 and 76 with mediocre results. We also created a summary of all of the players, so I can print this out and use this document as kind of like a play sheet for the draft, like it's a, the play calling sheet for like a football head coach or whatever. And we have an area for the new drafted players. It would be in these boxes here. This is where, just these columns for now. This is last year's data. But this is column A and B here. This is Team 1, Ohio. Team 2, St. Louis. Team 3, the Yankees. Team 4, Florida. So they'll be drafting any player from the first 4 years with the first pick, and then from the remaining 3, the remaining 2, and the remaining year. These will be their first 4 picks. The 5th round will all be 1976. 6th round, 1975. 7th round, 1974. 8th round, 1973. That's how the draft works. And that gets us looking at the 2,560. This is a spreadsheet here called the 2560. And what it does is This is this is where you copy the player you're drafting and place it into the slot you're drafting him into of the 8-round draft, 256 players for 32 teams. So these are all the eligible players. Basically, each individual season, 73, 74, 75, 76, they all have 640 cards based on what Strat-O-Matic prints. Strat-O-Matic first editions do not print 640. They print 576, a little bit more. So nameless cards are added to the draft just to redistribute talent throughout the expansion teams. Those nameless cards, for instance, in 1976, I can get 616 Strat-O-Matic cards, but I got to complete the balance, so I write in all these players, guys who played in that season, but didn't create a Strat-O-Matic card. For instance, let's take the case of, say, Ron Guidry, 25-year-old Yankee. In 1976, 7 appearances out of the bullpen with a 5.63 ERA. Probably forgot about that because the Yankees went to the World Series, but he was not really part of that team until the next few years. So, you'll see stuff like that in this group of players. I like to call the 300 series, basically because the 100 series is the 20 regular players Strat-O-Matic creates. The 200 series are the extra cards Strat-O-Matic creates. So I make the nameless cards the 300 series is how I came up with that. All that to get us to look at, finally, the 2,560 and to contemplate how the draft will unfold, beginning at the top of the draft. So first thing I want to do is I kind of want to go at the structure. Column D here is the team. And alphabetically it starts with Arizona. These are the 12 players that are currently on the team. And it has their stats. And it also, right beneath them, in a lighter shade of this green, this minty green, I guess, these are the same players that they're continuing on with, except these are their stats in other of the 4 years, the remaining 4 years, that you may want to improve them to, if necessary. At least there's an eligibility to do that. We have to make sure we are very careful how we do this so we don't accidentally draft a player into the league on 2 different teams. So we painstakingly make sure all the information for all the players stays relevant to the particular team. The next group for Arizona would then be the 4 players they want to keep, which are Ed Herman, Darryl Knowles, Steve Stone, and Jim Willoughby. They are in chronological order by year. This column to the right indicates that year. In the case of Ed Herman, it's chronologically 73, 4, 5, and 6, his 4 consecutive years. We can quickly look over here at his average, on-base, slugging, and OPS right there and determine what would his best year be. But again, we've already done some analysis. We should know what the best year is for that player. For instance, Ed Herman, we said 74. So let's see if we can confirm that with this sheet. In the 74 Ed Herman, this is the All-Star year he has. He has 259 with a 669 OPS. Slug's a little bit better in 75, but he went to the All-Star game in 74. Had more at-bats and more playing time in that year. And that is the grouping of Arizona. And then that sort of scheme will continue for all the teams alphabetically. Arizona's carry-on eligible players and their keepers, that group of 3. And we see that continue for Atlanta. See that? And then we'll just page down alphabetically. Remember, we have 2,560 records here. Obviously, all players aren't eligible to be drafted, but we want to keep the accounting reconcilable. And when we get to the Blue Jays right here, we discover the last player, Clyde, right here. This is the record number to this point. It's 1,674 of the 2,560 players, okay, which is leaving less than 1,000 available, are all allocated to the 32 teams. We also know that half of the 8 picks are protected by the 32 teams. So that really leaves just the 4 wildcard players for the 32 teams to draft. Beginning, of course, with those waivered players. And we, of course, have highlighted waivered players. Here, here, Joe Coleman there. Joe Coleman, 73. We highlighted. Let's take a look at that. So all the players are first sorted under the team that put them on waivers, then the player name and the player's stats for his chronology. Let's go down to Detroit, where Joe Coleman resides. Now, he's been put on waivers, but we indicate that 73 is his best year. We have his WHIP here, innings pitched, ERA. We find out that in 73, he's still a 23-game winner and was put on waivers because Detroit just did not have space. He's only 26 years old. 288 innings. The WHIP is 1.30. Nothing spectacular, but look how drastically he dips. These are the WHIPs for the next 3 years. 150, 158, and then 135 as a reliever or part-time player. So that's to suggest that Coleman has value if you get him in that year. He can pitch on 3 days rest in 73. That's one of the reasons why that card's highlighted. But these are the guys who are on waivers. Not a particularly strong list of waivered players. Teams drafting would expect to find more talent of players who haven't been in the league yet or players who they have protection for. Then after the waiver guys, this is the very small list of retired players. I remember I said there was 11 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This might be, normally we get a half dozen to dozen retired players called out of retirement because they fit what a team needs to finish their roster. But in this particular class, we might not see that. So we might see a whole glut of new players getting into our league because the retired list is not very good presently, and there's not a lot of them. So the next group, now we've got 1,813 records taken care of. We are under 800 available records of players, plus the nameless cards who are unavailable. I'm going to skip right to those because I put those at the very bottom in purple, this color. These records here, you can't draft these. These are all nameless Strat-O-Matic cards. I Xeroxed off a whole bunch of these, and I would just handwrite in a player name on them for the sheer purpose of redistributing them in individual leagues drafts as placeholders so that the expansion teams could have extra guys. For instance, the Ron Guidry card I mentioned, he would get assigned to the New York Yankees, and an active New York Yankees Strat-O-Matic card would move to an expansion team who needs some talent. So you see that record starts at 2349. 2560 minus 2349. There's 211 of these. So when I say the 2,560 eligible players, I really mean, the 2,348 eligible players or 2,349 eligible players. So it's not even a full list of 2,560. All right. So we've looked now at our first group of guys who are actually out there to be drafted by any team. These are your beginning in the year of 73. And sadly, this is the 4th attempt for these players to get drafted. We've been looking at these cards the last 3 drafts and have not been very impressed. And we have them sorted by position. Hitters first. We go from catcher through the outfield. We can actually even look at defense right here. And hey, look, we got a catcher with a -1 throwing arm, Chuck Brinkman. If I was making a bet, I'd say Chuck Brinkman gets into the league as somebody's backup catcher because he's got a negative throwing arm, even though he hits 187. That's why I said that it's taken Chuck Brinkman 3 previous drafts and it was completely ignored. But in the 4th year, that's the maximum number of cards for the first season, and that's why you see some fringe players making it into the league on their 4th and final attempt. So you have the hitters here, sorted by position, from 73. Then you have the pitchers. Sadly, there are no more left-handed pitchers left in 1973. Better get them in 4, 5, and 6. They're all gone. So the best right-handed pitcher on the market is Bill Bonham. Actually, he's a very good pitcher. 7-5 with a 3.02 ERA with the Reds with a 125 whip. Why is he still around? He throws right-handed. He would have been drafted year 1 if he threw left-handed. But in this system, he's just a guy. He's just your typical right-handed reliever who's good. We've got a slew of those. His ERA is beneath 4. He really should be drafted probably early in this draft. Because after that, J.R. Richards got an ERA of 4. Bill Champions is 370. Jackie Brown's 392. Everybody else is over 4. So that's why I say there's a big talent drop-off in year 1 because they've already been scooped up. It's the first of the 4 years. Next up, also free finally from their teams, players of 1974. These are also sorted by players. And look at the catching position. Remember we had just a few guys above? Chuck Brinkman and about 6 others? Well, that number nearly doubles, of course. 1 year later, you got about a dozen guys. You got Jim Sundberg with a -2 arm. He's free to sign with anybody. Jerry Moses, -1 arm. Steve Swisher. So these are the 74 players. And to review, last year they would have been protected through the first 4 rounds of the draft, then left unprotected, and now left undrafted. Those are the hitters. These are the pitchers. We have some lefties. That's a good story. We've got 5. We have 5 left-handed pitchers. Vic Albury, Mike Wallace, Dave Tomlin, Bill Laxton, Bill Travers. The whips start at 145 and go to 167. Mike Wallace is a 241 ERA with a 147 whip. Probably all these guys will get drafted because they throw with their left arm. They pick up a baseball and they throw from the left side of the mound. And that will get them into the league. If you look at the top righty, it's Oscar Zamora. Oscar, 3.12 ERA and a 120 whip. Cubs didn't want him because the Cubs had a lot of right-handed pitching. Dennis Blair, Glenn Abbott, Joe Decker. These guys are pretty good. You've got guys who can pitch on 3 days rest. Joe Decker of the Twins. That's a nice player. I guess the Twins had Burt Blyleven. They had Dave Goltz. They had no room for Joe Decker. He's there for anybody to take. 16-game winner. 3.29 ERA, 248 innings, a 133 whip. He is getting picked on, for folks. He'll be taken pretty early in the draft. You've got Jackie Brown, 74. 3.57 ERA, 3 days rest, 135. And it goes from there. But there are guys. There's Dick Ruthven can pitch on 3 days rest. Hey, our boy Bill Bonham. Now, this pretty much confirms he'll be drafted because even as good as he pitches in 73, in 74 he can pitch on 3 days rest, though not as effectively. Then we get into the 3rd year, 1975, and we have some protection going on here. These are year 2 protections for these players. The first group is Arizona. Now, obviously, you know Arizona didn't exist in this timeline. Well, we had Billy Baldwin was a Tiger, Bill Sharp was a Brewer, Pete Varney was a White Sox, Pat Darcy, Cincinnati, Tom Johnson, Minnesota. They all got sent to Arizona. Actually, I see a Yankee player here, Tippy Martinez. Well, I remember I mentioned Ron Guidry earlier. Ron Guidry template, nameless card, sent to the Yankees so that Tippy Martinez active Strat-O-Matic card could be moved around in the league. But anyway, these are the year 3 guys. Their draft eligibility or protection is the first 4 rounds of the draft. If they're not taken by this team who protects them, or even if a team wants to call them and make a deal, usually the team will trade that player and say, okay, you can draft our guy, but we want like a draft token, something like that. Within the first 4 rounds, if they're not taken by the protecting team, they fall into the general population. So there are guys here in 1975, and they're going to be, the hitters and pitchers are going to be combined into the one group. So this group is sorted alphabetically by teams again. And this will go A to Z, or A to Toronto, Arizona to Toronto, which ends right here. Toronto has Bob Davis and Dave McKay sent to them, protected. Which brings us to the last group of guys, and this is your full protection 1976 players. These guys, you cannot lose them in year 1. Of course, someone could call asking for a guy in a trade. You can deny the trade, but basically you do not have to worry if you don't want to draft a guy. Let's say in the case here, Gary Thomason, a Giant, hits 259, 745 OPS. You don't want to draft him? That's fine. You don't lose him. Next year, you'll still have protection of him as a year 2 player. Have to decide by the first 4 rounds next year whether you want Gary Thomason or not. Otherwise, he'll fall into the general population. And this list will go to A to Toronto, A to Z. Color-coded for convenience sake only. And that takes us directly to the nameless cards of 300s, which are not draft eligible. And that is every record looked at. So with that understanding, we have global sort columns here. At any time, if I want to take let's say, for instance, I wanted to take a sort of all those 1973 hitters and simply go, well, who's got the best OPS here? You know, I don't feel like looking at positional value here. My main interest is I want stick. The position doesn't really matter. I need a hitter. So column Z. I could just do a sort of column Z and determine who that is. In that grouping, Mike Adams is the player. Mike Adams was a outfielder, a limited number of playing time. That's why his stats can fluctuate, and they do drastically. A 212 batting average, but a 381 on base, with just a 379 slugging, 760 OPS. Interesting card. And then all I would have to do in this case is sort by column AN, or simply do an undo in this case. Undo is easier to do. And I'm right back to the original sort, so I can find Chuck Brinkman as the top defensive catcher and find all the other positional players in that list. So then it goes, well, let's kind of forecast how this draft might start. We know our draft order. We know for the second year in a row, here's the draft order. Ohio players, back-to-back last place finishes. Last year they drafted Vida Blue first overall. Acquired him in a trade. The expiring 1971 MVP Vida Blue card was traded to Ohio, mostly because he never pitches that well ever again, though he's still an all-star caliber pitcher. But he was traded from Oakland. Oakland got Al Downing and Don Wilson in return. Ohio is on the clock again. We can kind of do this is how the Ohio would go when they are on the clock. We can get right into their group of players, which is right here. And this is the candidate of guys they have control over. Obviously, they can continue to improve one of their 12 players. They can address the 4 needs of keeper, or they can go into the talent pool of drafting players. Step 1 might be to take a look at Ohio, like who can they improve internally? And looking at the list of guys they can improve internally, we can say Larry Lintz gets better in 74, Dan Driesen gets better in 75, Elrod Hendricks gets better in 75, but we've really highlighted here, Vida Blue gets a lot better in 76. So let's lean on that for a moment, stick a pin in that, because this is looking like the bar right now. We have our keeper list. We know it's Gene Kleins, Doc Ellis, Tom Hall, Rudy May. Gene Kleins is mostly a platoon outfielder. Doc Ellis has some nice seasons, but none really stand out. He's pretty linear. Tom Hall at the very front in 73 for the Reds. Rudy May has a bad 73, and he's decent elsewhere, but there's no real highlights here. It's not sexy. And of course, the waiver list is just what it is. It's definitely not first-round pick material or the retired list. So the next place this team would look, we'll get back to their grouping in a moment. We can actually draw a line here like this. And then we can go down here and say, let's take a look at their... First, we'll look at their second-year players and year 2 players. And is there really... I really doubt there'll be someone that good here, because he probably would have been taken last year in theory. Why wasn't he taken last year? Ivan DeJesus, Morris Nettles, Lee Richard. None of that sounds like first-round material. They're all got 5-something OPSs, so oots-nay on that. All right. Well, what about 76? This should be the greener, right out of AAA, you would think. You got Mike Easler, Pepe Frias, Ron Jackson, Jerry Mumphrey, Mike Norris. Okay, they're all too young, basically, is a short answer. But these guys would be really good players by the end of the decade, early 80s. Mike Easler mashes with Pittsburgh, Boston, the Yankees. Ron Jackson hits 330 for the Angels in there. Mumphrey always hit 300. Mike Norris has a magic 1980. We're just too early. Plain and simple, it's too soon. These are future picks. You'd like to get these guys on your roster as soon as possible so nobody steals them away from you. But for first round pick, statistically the best player here is probably Jerry Mumphrey, a 258 hitter with a 653 OPS. Not looking good for the first pick in the draft for Ohio. Now you're scrambling around looking at the field, right? All the guys that everybody else is looking at. The, 4-year free agents of 73, 3-year free agents of 74. Nobody you could offer a trade to. 76, let's think about this. The Cincinnati Reds won the World Series, right? So they probably have a nice keeper pool here. Oh, yeah, of course. Ken Griffey. So Cincinnati, who just was in the World Series, they have Ken Griffey. Ken Griffey, 1976, this is the 336 year, 851 OPS. So, I mean, if Ohio really wants to get on the telephone and talk to the Cincinnati Reds and say, hey, any chance you can trade us Ken Griffey and we can make him the first pick in the draft? I mean, the Reds would laugh at that, but they'd say, "Oh yeah, we'll do that. Give us 2 future first round picks." And see, that's how the draft will lean. You teams do not want to just give rookie class studs away like that in a 4-year carryover league. But they could, since Ohio can continue to call around, or they could bite the bullet and decide that Doc Ellis is a solid, star, has his moments. He's a 17-game winner in 1976 with a 1.28 whip. This is with the Yankees. would be in the World Series. That's some nice star power for Doc Ellis. Vida Blue and Doc Ellis look like the highlight here. And Rudy May, he's probably the third best player here. He does have a 114 whip in 1974. But of all these, I'm still leaning to Vida Blue. And that would be to get him into 1976. That's a 4-year contract. And statistically, it is a significant bump. Vida Blue, his winning percentage isn't that great. He's 18-13. But that was for a really bad Oakland team that was breaking up at the time. He's got a 235 whip, pitches on 3 days rest with a 110 whip. That's a 4-year deal. Yeah, I don't think I can find anything better than that for this team. And one of the stipulations I have for the first overall pick of the draft is you have to have some level of MVP, Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, All-Star, Hall of Fame, some sort of credential. Blue was a 71 MVP, been to plenty of All-Star games, and just was taken first in the previous draft just to get him on this roster. And now they're going to make him even better. So to me, that's the first round pick of Ohio. His ERA was 3.01 and the whip was 123. So he gets better across the board. He gives up fewer home runs. And he had a terrible year. I'm going to see if I wonder if I have stats here. I might have some stats, a stat highlight for Ohio here. Let's see if we highlight how bad his year was. Rudy May was the all-star for the team. Doc Ellis had a 2.68 ERA for the team. Here's Vida Blue. Vida Blue was 3-5 with a 4.57 ERA with that 1975 card. So maybe it's just a bad card. Sometimes, you know, statistically, the Strat card plays a lot worse or a lot better. Apparently that 75 card played a lot worse. Maybe the 76 card plays a lot better. Those are all enough reasons to suggest that Vida Blue improving in 76 would be the first player picked. So if I was to make this choice, I would go to this. This is where the draft information will be. Actually, you can see Vida Blue's name is right there from the 75 card that was right there a year ago. I would go copy the column A's and B's over here, hit paste. So I got the year number 76. He's the first pick of 76. Ohio, the team name, and then I would just go cut, and then I would just go paste. And that just made the draft pick for them. I'm going to undo all that, though. That's how it's done. That's how it would be for that player. And then, of course, you know, you have all these. Now, that just makes this, the record fields for this would be one record short. Now we're down to 25.59 because Vida Blue would have been removed from that list. Let's briefly, let's go through maybe a couple more teams, then we'll call it. The Cardinals. How would the Cardinals go about drafting? Is there an internal improvement of the Cardinals that we need to know about? Mike Phillips, Mike Tyson, Bate McBride has a really nice 76, and Bob Forsch can pitch on 3 days rest. Nice possibilities there. I think they can even do better. Their keepers. Barber, John Curtis, Bob Gibson, Ted Sizemore, all early keeper improvement. Probably an older list. Generally, of course, with Bob Gibson, it's going to be an older list. Barber's also getting, there's only 1 year left. Nothing sexy as far as first round. Let's look at the young Cardinals next. So we're going to go down here to the gray area. This is the 1976 season. And these are the guys allotted to the Cardinals. Not all of them will be Cardinals. Some will be free agents. But you have Keith Hernandez, Terry Humphrey, Jerry Martin, Gary Templeton, John Denny, Eric Rasmussen, and Rick Rhoden, who came out of the Dodgers system. Hernandez is a 289 hitter, 803 OPS. Pretty good. I don't think it's quite first round. Of course, if it's the Keith Hernandez who wins a batting title and an MVP in 79 and 80 and so forth, yeah, that's first round, but he's still young. He's 22 years old. Gary Templeton's just 20 years old. It's 291. Nice players. Don't think there'll be the first round pick. I think it's going to be McBride. We'll look at their year 2 guys from 75. And you'll see it's Keith Hernandez again, even younger now at 21. He's just a 250 hitter. Ken Reitz, Ken Rudolph, Eric Rasmussen. I want to go up top to their keeper guy because the keeper and the carrying on with Bate McBride. And there we go. So here is a nice couple of options. Bate McBride in 1976. It's 335. 831 OPS. Yeah, that's a batting title candidate right there. So that could become, and he's still a 2 in center field. The 335 Bate McBride, that could be their first pick in the draft, the second pick overall. That would be worth it. I think Hernandez and Templeton are probably second or third round picks. Let's look at the next team. Should be the Yankees. This will be intriguing. Are they getting any closer to that 76 World Series? Probably not. So the Yankees, do they improve internally? Thurman Munson, 76 card. I think he's the MVP, right? But guess what? 73. I still think he's the best card of the decade. That's what he's in right now. 20 homers and a -3 arm. So I understand he's the MVP in 76. I don't know if you're actually making him better just because he didn't win the MVP in 73. Or maybe 76 was kind of a weaker year for the MVP award. No offense to Thurman, but I'm going to hold where he's at. And Roy White's got a strong 76. Okay. Well, what about the Yankees 76 guys? I mean, they're trying to get to a World Series, right? Yankees have the rights to John Wockenfuss and Dan Spillner. Neither of those screams first round pick. But in the redraft, when we redistributed talent, one of the expansion teams, Las Vegas, ended up with Willie Randolph. 21-year-old Willie Randolph. Still hits 267 with a 684 OPS. Dare the Yankees make a trade, and it might just be a minor trade because of his statistics aren't particularly eye-popping. They're not like Ken Griffey, for Pete's sakes. Griffey at 336. But might you offer a draft token to the Vegas to get Willie Randolph back in pinstripes? I don't think Willie Randolph originally was a Yankee. I thought he was in the Pittsburgh farm system, if not mistaken. But they have an opportunity to go get Willie Randolph from an expansion team back in New York. If they don't do that, the Yankees, their internal improvements, Thurman Munson, and we can look at that analysis just to show how the spreadsheet works. So here's Munson, 73. Here are your numbers, 301, 362, 487, 849. Here's your defense. He's a -3 arm catcher. So is he really better in 76 when he wins the MVP? He's right here. You tell me. 302, 337, 432, 769 OPS, under 800. He's a -2 arm catcher. He's just a little bit less. He's got 17 homers. He had 20 up here. Fewer homers, lower OPS, weaker arm in his MVP year. Just saying. Doesn't sound like a smart thing to do, to basically waste a first round pick and making a player worse in that case. Yankees could be stuck here because you're left with the keepers. And you got some nice ones, though. You got Sparky Lyle, Bobby Mercer, Greg Nettles. And actually, I could go either way with this. Greg Nettles, 76. Bingo. Okay, it doesn't look glamorous. You're like 254, 802 OPS. But you know, Greg Nettles hit 32 homers in 1976, and he led the American League. Another note, 1976, pretty blah year for offense, particularly power. 32 homers for third baseman for New York, led the American League. So don't, you're not going to get these eye-popping numbers you get in expansion years. 77, you'll get eye-popping numbers. 76, it's kind of blah. You got to, just take what you can get. So Nettles would be a good first-round pick, but you also got to consider Sparky Lyle as a first-round pick. 1.19 ERA in 1976. I know he's got a Cy Young in here somewhere. I don't know if it's 76 or 77. But he's got ERAs of 251, 166, 226. So, and you got Bobby Mercer for all the Yankee fans. And Mercer's got, he's got a 304, 821 in this list. So, a keeper. It's obviously going to be a keeper for the Yankees. Let's do a fourth team, and then we can call it for that. Because, again, there's a lot of possibility here. Another expansion team is Florida. Always interesting to see what expansion teams do, because they didn't exist in this timeline. Do they have an internal improvement? Expansion teams are the teams I prefer to use the internal improvement option the most. They have to get the dozen guys on their team better ASAP to be competitive. They obviously got them as mostly extra player cards, but now it's time to find if that player has a second year that's better in a future to get him his contract extended. So we look at the carry-ons for Florida Marlins. And there are a bunch, believe it or not. There are a lot. There's a bunch of these guys right here. Mario Guerrero doesn't make a lot of sense as a shortstop. But here's a great one. This is outstanding. Two great ones. These both could be picked. Matter of fact, I'm going to predict that these are going to be two of the 1976, their 76 picks are going to be amongst these guys. Hal McRae hits 332, runner-up to the batting title to George Brett. Ed Figueroa, 76. Now he's with the Yankees, and now he's part of that World Series team. William Montanez, Tom Bergmeyer, big 76s. The difference is Montanez and Bergmeyer have good 75 cards. McRae and Figueroa have 74 cards, so you're giving them a 2-year extension. So that one extra year could mean a lot to these teams. So I don't have to go any further. McRae and Figueroa are probably going to be the first pick, either one. And then the other 76 card will be the 5th round pick. They can be announced simultaneously in the draft if you own the rights to that player. Because you can't, the rights can't be taken away, so you just announce it ahead of time just to speed up the draft process. So Hal McRae and Ed Figueroa are probably going to be their picks. Let's take a look at the stats of those guys, and we'll wrap it for tonight. Not even looking at the rookie class, because we'll just do diligence here. Here's your rookie class. Ed Armbrister, Pete Lecoq, Dave Moats, Chuck Scrivener, Vern Rule. Yeah, none of those guys are better than the guys we just mentioned. And the year 2 guys, yeah, Vern Rule, Eric Reich, Fernando Arroyo, Craig Reynolds, Jose Morales. Which leaves the next batch is, of course, their keepers. Louis Aparicio, Manny Mota, Beta Pinson, Ellie Rodriguez. Of that group, only Manny Mota will hit 300. Hits 314 with a 733 OPS. But Hal McRae is better than that. So Hal McRae carrying on to 76, 332, 868 OPS. and Ed Figueroa. 2 years, really. His 75 year with California or his 76 year with the Yankees. Pitches on 3 days rest both times. Statistically, he's a little bit better with the Angels. A 121 whip with the Yankees, a 129 whip. One loss record, better with the Yankees. That team won more games. Frankly, it's a coin flip. And that's great news. The fact that you have a coin flip for Figueroa is very advantageous. Let's go back to this for a second. You see that? We mentioned that he's got a coin flip here. That could give you, maybe you do get Montanez or Bergmeyer with McRae and Figueroa, you know. That would be a pretty good move. See, that's how you get a third really good player on a really bad team. Montanez or Bergmeyer or Mary Guerrero. We have them all here. Montanez in 76. 321, 772. Bergmeyer in 76. 8-1, 250 ERA, a 107 whip. That's significant. So you see a bad Florida team, really bad team, can suddenly become a 500 team as quickly as a batting champion, a 20-game winner, and either a stud closer or a 320 hitting first baseman. That will really help a really bad Florida team. Frankly, if I was grading the first four teams, not knowing really what the future holds for Ohio, St. Louis, and New York in the future rounds, I think I would give Florida the best grade for, you know, identifying 3 players they'd like to add. So that's good news for them. And with that, it's been a nice long video. Hope this gets to illustrate how the league is put together and how the analysis works to make this as efficient as I can make it and competitive for all 32 parts of the league. Thanks for checking out the 25-60, the 73-76 carryover league. We're just over a month away from the draft, and we'll see you next time.